Okay, hi, welcome back. My name's Devraj. This is Mysticism and the Body. And today I want to start upon what will probably be quite a long course about the Esoteric Tarot. Esoteric Tarot. And in this video, I'll be giving an introduction to the Esoteric Tarot and covering especially how you use it, what you can expect from it, and how it seems to work. And then slowly over time, I'll do introductions for each of the 22 keys of the Tarot Major Arcana as well. Quite possibly not in any specific order. I'll probably begin with the middle row here. Anyway, just to get started, so these 22 keys arranged like this are from a school called the Builders of the Adytum, created back in the 1920s in America by a guy called Dr. Paul Foster Case. And I think they're generally recognized as the preeminent esoteric tarot deck in existence. That might be there might be people who still favour the Rider Waite's Golden Dawn deck or Crowley's Thoth Tarot, but I think generally it's accepted that the both the course on tarot and the keys themselves created by Builders of the Adytum are the kind of best, really. I was actually listening the other day to Pat Zalewski, an old Australian guy who wrote a lot of books giving information about Golden Dawn rituals and this kind of thing. And he mentioned a couple of times in the interview, everyone knows the Bota keys are the best. Now, just to be clear, this is not to say that Bota Builders of the Adytum are the best esoteric school in the world, simply that each school has its own kind of specialities, stuff that it's strong in, stuff that it's perhaps a little weak in. But if you're interested in esoteric tarot, then I think Bota are the best. So these are the 22 keys of the Bota Tarot, arranged as you often see them, with the full key, a 0 at the top, and then sort of 1 to 7, 8 to 14, and 15 to 21, the world at the end there. These designs were made about a century ago for Dr. Case by a woman called, I think, Jessie Burns Park, something like that, possibly Jessie Park Burns. And you can see her initials on some of the keys. Maybe we'll pick that up at some point, sneakily hidden here and there. For the purposes of esoteric tarot, you only need the 22 trumps of the major arcana. You don't need the rest of the keys. In total, a tarot deck has something like 78 keys, but you only need the 22 trumps. And generally, with esoteric tarot rumors, it is shrouded in quite a lot of mystery, as you would expect. And, being a very practical kind of person, I like to try and dissolve as much of that mystery as possible. I do feel like some people who talk about this subject, write about this subject, they only kind of increase the mystery, and often if you listen to their podcasts, they camp it up a bit, to get the viewers in. I myself feel the urge to kind of camp it up a bit when I make videos about mystical things, but I'm resisting the urge. So I want to make it like you can really start to understand this stuff as much as it realistically can be understood. The deck, they say in the scene of Builders of the Adytum and the kind of Western mystery schools, the stuff that developed from kind of Rosicrucianism in the 17th century Europe. They say that it originates in North Africa in Fez, but I'm a bit skeptical about that. Actually, the earliest kind of, once you understand what esoteric tarot is, and you're familiar with the actual drawings and why the kind of certain elements of them denote them as being esoteric, I haven't seen any decks really from before about 1760 in France, which I would consider to be esoteric personally. I mean, they might well be out there. I haven't personally seen them. So I think it's a relatively modern creation. And one of the things with there being 22 of them is that they map exactly to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And I think that mapping was done by Eliphas Levi back in the 19th century. He was really the forerunner of the big explosion in European mysticism that occurred with the Golden Dawn around the late 19th century. So what do we mean by esoteric here? Because whilst obviously tarot keys have existed for a long time, long before 1760, what are we meaning by esoteric here? And I think the easiest way to explain it is to, you have to detach completely from this idea of using tarot to divine the future, predict the future, work out when you're going to meet a tall, dark stranger or become a millionaire, this kind of thing. It's really, to me, not about that at all. It's not about that at all. That may have been, some people would say that that was a kind of concept which the esoteric tarot jumped on and kind of utilized in the same way as some people think that, the Christian church utilized old pagan festivals and kind of jumped on them, so to speak. So when you come across one of these tarot keys, how do you use it? Well, essentially, there's three things that you do. Now, when I was with Builders of the Adytum back in the late 90s, early 2000s, they would make you spend 2 weeks drawing each of these keys, not actually drawing it, coloring each of these keys. You get kind of a cardboard sheet with the black and white image, and you have to color them in paint with little hand paint, like at school. And the reason they get you to do this is to really impress the symbols into your mind, basically. So I wouldn't say that you necessarily need to color them if you're interested in esoteric tarot. You certainly can. You can buy from Builders of the Adytum this a sheet with the designs on it in black and white. But what you do need to do is to really get the symbols into your brain somehow. This is very, very important. Really just soft focusing on one key at a time and spending a few minutes just taking it in. So that means like taking in the individual bits of the symbolism, whatever it is. Let's zoom in on a key here. How about, actually, it's not a very good way to zoom in. So just to pick one key, if it's the first key, the Fool, you allow yourself to really take in the color of the key, the sun up here in this corner, and this guy looks, it's difficult to see if he's really a man or a woman. That's common with the esoteric tarot from this school. The clothing he's wearing, he's got this kind of gown on with his designs. He's holding a rose in his left hand. In his right hand, he's got this stick at a certain angle. It's got a bag in it, and a kind of eagle thing here has certain, it has all these kind of elements of symbolism in it. So you spend time looking at that. There's mountains in the background. He looks like he's about to walk off a cliff. And there's a little dog kind of following along at his side. So you take all those elements in, and then you also just spend a few minutes just kind of soft focusing on the whole key to get the whole key in as well. So that's one element of the process that you do. And the second element is to read about the key from, ideally, let me have a look, this book by Dr. Paul Foster Case, Tarot, A Key to the Wisdom of the Ages. We'll go through the symbols of each key as well, just explaining to you the symbols. So you're spending time looking at the key, taking in the details, taking in the whole thing. You're learning about what the different elements of symbolism mean. For example, with this Fool key, you might learn that this red color is to do with desire and fiery emotional energy, that this bag is some kind of form of like hidden memory unlocked by this eagle symbol, which is to do with Scorpio Kundalini. You might learn that these mountains are to do with kind of a mathematical sort of reality which underlies existence. There's all sorts of things that the book will tell you about the key. And then the third element is you learn with your eyes closed to build the key up in your imagination, and some people find this easy. I myself find it very hard, but I stick with it, and I do slowly get there. So these are the three things that you basically learn to do with the key. You learn to take in the key visually, the individual little bits of it and the whole. You read about the symbols. And then you practice trying to build it up in your mind with your eyes closed, build the image up so that you can conjure it up. You don't even need to look at it first, so that you can conjure it up. So those are the three things that you do with the keys. Now let's take a look at what this is meant to achieve. Because you might be wondering, okay, but what's the point of doing all this? And to get to that, we need to start to consider the world of symbols, basically. And I've never been a big fan of Carl Jung. This book I've got mentioned here, Man and His Symbols, Carl Jung, because I sort of come from a therapy background, and I find it all his work extremely cerebral. But that aside, it really has to be said that no other character, I don't think, who was remotely famous approached what Carl Jung did with symbols, which was really to to bring psychology into the whole esoteric domain, the whole alchemical domain, via his understanding of symbols and all the books that he wrote about this. His basic symbols like the self and the shadow and the anima, animus, and this kind of thing, the integrated self, and then all the other little symbols that you get around, whether they're archetypal symbols in society around the wise old woman, or the beautiful young woman, the young sort of male hero, the king, whatever, and just heaps of other alchemical symbols. You've got symbols for all the different metals, alchemical metals, symbols you find in astrology, in Eastern art, this kind of thing. And what Jung did that was really, really exciting, I think, and relevant to understanding esoteric tarot, was that he conceived of the idea of a kind of collective unconscious. That was the term he used. And this collective unconscious was populated by symbols, literally hundreds and hundreds of symbols. So if we imagine this from a little drawing I got AI to make, this kind of idea that we are here, but we're standing maybe on a little rock or something, but we're surrounded by an ocean of symbols in our unconscious. And this term collective unconscious, refers to the idea that that this is a shared heritage that humans have. And I think whilst Jung's ideas were radical in the middle of the 20th century, I think now a lot of people would see, that obviously symbols are something which really pull us on multiple levels in our culture. And indeed, one of the issues with trying to work with symbols these days is that they are so predominant in mass media, in social media, in advertising, in soap operas, whatever. You've just got symbols everywhere, to the point where the amount of noise, the amount of sort of signal noise surrounding the average human, is so high, it's actually getting harder to work with symbols, as a chap I know online in the esoteric field recently pointed out. But let's take a look, first of all. Why would we work with symbols in mysticism? I've mentioned this a little bit before, but basically, if you start to put symbols into your conscious mind, in a kind of systematic, intelligent way, then it grounds you, because these symbols are existing. Whether it's a solar motif, or the idea of a lion standing proud, or a serpent, a maze, alchemical symbol for sulfur over here, an eagle. These symbols pre-exist inside your unconscious, and if you start to systematically put them into your conscious mind, you create a link with this subconscious layer. And so this is one of the ideas with the tarot deck, that you're creating a link. If we let's go back and look at some of these symbols. If we look at this guy, the Emperor, you can see on one level, he's kind of like a sulfur symbol, alchemical sulfur. There's a triangular shape here, and his legs are crossed underneath that, So that is picked up by the mind on a certain level. If you keep impressing this key into your mind, you might not be at all consciously aware of it, but it's locking into this symbol. And the fact that you also know this piece of information, I mean, some would say that doesn't help, that it kind of sets up a certain dynamic in the conscious mind. Others would say that it does help. I'm a bit in the middle there. But essentially, by impressing this symbol in your mind, along with all the other bits and bobs of symbology going on in this key, that is being imprinted in, and you're creating a connection. So by impressing these keys into your mind slowly, bit by bit, you're creating an anchoring really in the deep unconscious, the deep collective unconscious in your mind. And this is very useful because it holds you upright. The core of mysticism, as I've mentioned before, is this progressive dissolution of the sense of intellectual selfhood. The intellectual me, the thinking me, the limited me that exists, this idea. It's like a simulation running in our brain. And the core of mysticism is dissolving that. But just to try and dissolve it without any support is quite an extreme thing to do. Maybe some people can manage it. I couldn't manage it. It would spin me out a lot. And doing work with tarot first, along with a few other things I was involved in, such as expanding the sensation of the body, that supported me. That supported me to dissolve more the self, which is really the core of mysticism and getting some level of mystical experience. So basically, what we're doing when we start to work with these keys individually, spending a week, on each one, a few minutes a day, just impressing it in there, learning about the symbols in a book, and then trying to kind of build it up in our mind at some point in the day. What we're doing is we're grounding our psyche in the deep unconscious. So this is one aspect of esoteric tarot. Now, there's a second aspect as well, because what you might notice in these keys, and this is even more mystical kind of aspect, what you might notice in these keys is that they're a mixture of symbols. It's not just the emperor is this kind of sulfur symbol. He's also holding an ankh here, an Egyptian ankh. He's got a ram for Aries on the side. He's got a Hebrew letter, the letter Hey, assigned to him. He's got a number, the number 4, assigned to him. He's assigned to Aries as an astrological sign. All these things you would learn from reading the book. So he has multiple symbols. So each time you look at one of these keys, here's the Empress, again, multiple symbols, There's a lot of green here. There are these kind of cypress trees. There's water flowing at the background here. She's seated. She's visibly pregnant. She's going to give birth to something. She's got these stars around her head and this moon at her feet, like the woman from second book of Revelation in the end of the New Testament. She's got 5 roses here. There's symbols all over the place, some of which you'll learn about, some of which simply are impressed upon your mind. There are these beads, this necklace she's got. She's got this little kind of T-square image going on here. There's a dove here, it's wheat down here. It's absolutely rammed with symbols. She's also a symbol for Venus, she's got the number 3. She's got the Hebrew letter Daleth, which also means door here. So there's literally, your brain is being besieged with symbols. Now, you might say, well, that could be a bit confusing, and I can understand why someone would think that, but there's something very interesting going on here. So what's going on is, this guy is literally tapping into like 15 different symbols from within the ocean when he brings the key up into his mind. You're literally drawing up different areas of the subconscious, and it's like you're mixing them. You're mixing them in your own mind and in your own body. And you're doing this with each of the 22 keys. It's rammed with symbols, some of which you'll learn about in the book, some of which you won't really recognize, some of which will kind of come out to you at some point inside. But basically, you're drawing on a whole, from this wealth of like hundreds of symbols, you're pulling in certain ones with each key and you're mixing them in your mind. And what's believed is that this has a physical effect as well. And actually, one of the physical effects, it's a very kind of secret and I would say somewhat controversial. In fact, it's not even really controversial because so few people kind of speak about it. But if you pull back and look at a lot of mysticism, one of the things you're going to notice is that it's a lot about light. It's a lot about light. There's the Latin word for light, lux, is predominant everywhere. It adds to 65 in Latin numerology, which is associated with a lot of mystical things in all sorts of different traditions. The Emerald Tablet of Hermes, a very ancient little text, ends. What I have to say is completed concerning the operation of the sun. If you look at the Rosicrucians and the idea of this word ros, which is usually rendered as a rose, but it also means dew. And if you look at bits of Genesis, it's talking about the fat of the land and the dew, that you'll have enough dew. We can also consider in this scene words like enlightenment, words like illuminated, like illuminati, the illuminated ones. All of these references to light. If you look at the Rosicrucian Fama Fraternitatis, the original document from the early 1600s, initially in German, which set off the whole Rosicrucian movement and caused a massive kind of intellectual furore in early 17th century Europe. That has a whole section where it talks about the vault, and in the vault there is a sun which shines even though there's no light coming from the outside. And all of these things are referring to the idea that you can become illuminated, that you can actually get sunlight into your blood, and that this is affected by making subtle changes in your gut through esoteric practices. So, I'm saying this and I'm aware that it might all sound a bit weird, but in my opinion, this is absolutely what a lot of these a lot of these early texts are pointing at. It's all about sunlight. It's about the operation of the sun. Georges Bataille, controversial French thinker from the around the time of the middle of the 20th century, spoke of the sun, but it's hurling energy at us all the time, and it's not really getting a return. He wrote this book, The Accursed Share, very controversial work. And this was one of the concepts. But to me, when you start to grasp alchemy, you can see that the sun is getting a little bit of a return. There is this operation of the sun going on, where what's believed to happen is that by working with the tarot keys and all this symbolism and getting your mind to absorb these different streams of symbols with each key, it's like you're downloading a kind of program into your brain. Very old program which operates in your gut and starts to create certain changes in how your body processes food. Because food contains sunlight, it also contains sunlight, but it mostly passes out from the gut, it passes out. But the belief is that changes can happen to the lacteals, changes can happen to some of the gut chemicals, and that your body slowly starts to absorb some of the light and it goes into your bloodstream. The idea is it spins around inside the bloodstream, creates changes to the pineal gland, and causes you to become illuminated. Now, this might all it might all sound a little bit crazy, but if you ask me, this is absolutely what it's about. And, in the old days, no one would really speak about this in very clear terms. Nowadays, you can speak about this, and most people probably won't believe you. But when we look at these tarot keys and what they're doing, this is absolutely what they're slowly doing. You take them in, you learn to build them up in your mind, you understand the elements of the symbolism, and slowly this program starts to run in your brain and your body, and your body starts to change a little bit. It starts to change, it starts to absorb sunlight. So that's like, my opinion of a deeper esoteric meaning going on here. But individually, there's also a lot of psychological meaning in these keys and the idea of a progression, towards maturity. If we look at, say, Key 8, strength, we got this red lion, classic alchemical symbol. And this woman, she is slowly opening its head. Looks like a dangerous kind of thing to do, and there's this kind of wreath wrapped around her and the lion of roses, and she's opening the mouth of the lion. And she's doing it, obviously with some concern, she's doing it, but she's not scared of the lion. She's opening its mouth. Now, your mind on a deep level will know exactly what this means. And what it means is the idea that, the heart and love can usefully move this phase of the Kundalini energy. You had the green lion, who's like the young male who just wants to go out there and get in some fights and have some fun. And the red lion is more mature lion. And at that stage, this feminine principle or this heart principle can come in and start to convert the nature of this energy. This is also referred to. You'll find it in Book of Revelation. The idea that energy can go to create Babylon. You can self-aggrandize yourself and build your ego up and become this big kind of guy, whether you're male or female, or that you're pushing the energy out, your Kundalini energy out, or you can learn to hold it in the body, where it creates certain changes, like we're speaking about, and direct it into the heart center, in the middle of your chest. So this is what this. Now, if you were to just look at this key for a few weeks, and say 10 minutes a day, your mind would understand it on a deep level, but also consciously knowing that can be useful as well. Okay, cool. So I think I've covered quite a bit in this talk. Hopefully you found a useful introduction to the esoteric tarot and got some ideas about what the tarot is really about. I'll be continuing this series by looking, by looking at individual keys and spending a little bit of time on them, going through the symbols and explaining some stuff. But if you're already excited by this presentation, you want to get more into tarot, you can either check out my book, Opening the Body with the Cube of Space, where you will go on an inner journey with these keys, or you can just look for the keys online or look for this book, Tarot, Key to the Wisdom of the Ages, and begin, taking the images and learning about the keys yourself. Okay, cool. Thanks very much for tuning in, and I'll see you again soon for some more mysticism in the body. Bye for now.